we invited you all here today to really discuss designing your retirement game plan and how that works if you decide to engage us for your retirement game plan. Um, every single one of our initial coaching sessions starts the same, which is tell us a little bit about yourselves and how you hope we can help. Our first coaching session is really designed to get to know you, your goals, your financial situation, your future plans, and again, to answer those questions that you brought along with you.
Yeah, our goal is to provide you with clarity and confidence as you move into this next chapter of your life. And we think the best way to give you an idea of how the process works is to invite you along for the ride today. So let's outline a coaching session from start to finish using a past coaching session as our guide.
So let's talk about Joe and Mary. They came in for a coaching session a few weeks ago, and they've been longtime listeners to our show on KTRS. I'm sure many of you are also listeners. That's how you initially found us. They gave our office a call and chatted with Kelly, our office manager. She finds a day and time that works for you. Joe and Mary decided they wanted to come into the office, but we're also more than happy to offer phone appointments or Zoom appointments if that is more conducive to your schedule. Kelly, when they found the best day and time, also sent over a few pieces of information for them. First, our financial questionnaire, which is just a brief synopsis of yourself: date of birth, are you married, your children, other beneficiaries, your current work status, your current income needs, as well as we send over an investor profile questionnaire, which just gives us an idea of what type of investor you feel that you are in the place that you are right now. And then finally, just a list of documents that we ask for. If you happen to have them available, we'd love to take a look at them. They include things like your 401k statement, your other investment account statement, so we can see how you're currently invested, where your assets are held. Also, if you have past tax returns, for us to take a look at how your income is broken down. For many people that we work with, it's pretty simple. It's income from employment, but we have worked with individuals that have other income sources. For example, they're already taking pensions, or maybe they have real estate income that they are also collecting. We like to take a look at that to see also what dividends and interests you might be accumulating or paying taxes on, so we can get the best picture of your financial life as we can.
Yeah, again, this information is very important because it gives us a good overview of where your assets are. And frankly, during a coaching session, which we like to say is an hour, usually they run about 45 minutes. What happens is that we'll be in a position by having that information to truly create your retirement game plan in front of you, which is really what our objective is. So again, we always like to start off with, tell us a little bit about yourselves and how you hope that we can help you. And it really gives you an opportunity, we think, to tell us what's top of mind for you. And at this particular time with Joe and Mary, we wanted to find out, obviously what they're doing for a living, when they want to actually, they're considering separating from their employment. And a lot of times we're getting answers such as, I want to retire right away, or I've got 2 or 3 years till retirement, or Mary's going to retire, but I'm not going to. And so,
Or, even sometimes I
right.
would say people tie their retirement to something specific. I want to pay off the house before I retire, or, I'd like to get one of us to Medicare eligibility, being 65 years old before I retire. So we're also there to either reinforce those thoughts, say like, hey, that's a great plan, or maybe we can achieve it faster than you think.
And some folks will even say, we've been listening to you for many years, and we're coming in to find out, are we actually retirement rock stars? And so that's something that we love to hear and we love to confirm. So let's tell you a little bit about Joe and Mary, and Aaron will also then get into the numbers. Joe's currently working for a local public airplane manufacturer whose headquarters moved from St. Louis to Seattle, Washington. And Mary is, she's a nurse, but she's set to retire at the end of this year after many years of service. Joe would like to retire at the end of 2023 as well, but he's on his last leg of a project that he's been working on for many years, and he'd like to see this and really work through this until it comes to its completion. So he may end up working a few months after the end of the year, but we'll have to see. Both of them are 64, which frankly is, I want to say, is a reasonably good, is it a good way age we're used to. Most of the folks that come to visit with us on coaching sessions are pre-Medicare eligible. And obviously one of the things and other things that we talked about them with is how to make that smooth transition into from their current employer-based healthcare to Medicare as well.
Yep. So Joe and Mary, excuse me, were great savers during their working careers, and they've managed to create quite a bit of retirement savings. In addition to that, because Mary has been a long-time nurse, she has a nice pension to go along with her retirement plan, as well as Social Security benefits. So not only did we discover pretty quickly that Joe and Mary have a nice base of income, because not only do they have 2 Social Security incomes that we'll get to, but also a pension available. They were great savers in retirement. So through our conversation with Joe and Mary, we found that they need about $8,000 a month to make their lives work. So that's how much they're spending every month. We know in retirement that the majority of their income is going to be taxable, so we want to gross that up for taxes. And that really means that they need about $9,600 a month, so they could pay $1,600 to taxes and have $8,000 available to them to spend like they already are doing now. At Joe's normal retirement age, so that's a few years off, it'll be $3,200 a month. And Mary's at that same point, since they're both the same age, a few months different, will be $2,400 a month. Mary also has that pension that I mentioned that is valued at $1,200 a month. So they have a really nice base of income that's going to be available to them. Now, Joe's 401k at the large airplane manufacturer currently sits at about $2 million. And Mary's retirement 403b through a large hospital system in the St. Louis area is valued at $450,000. They've also managed to, over time, put about $80,000 into a Roth account. So it's important that we make some distinctions here, which is another reason why we love to see statements, so we can very clearly determine not just where your investments are held, but how they're going to be taxed in retirement, because we know taxation is an important part of retirement, but it's a given. So we're just going to we have to work around the rules that the IRS sets out. But since we know those rules, if we have the opportunity to take a look at not only where your assets are held, but how they're going to be taxed, that's going to give us the opportunity to design the most tax efficient game plan for you. They've also created about $300,000 in savings after tax. Now, we're not going to count that as part of their investable assets, because Joe and Mary are pretty conservative, and they really like to have a large amount of cash, liquid and available to them. Not only is this their vault money, but this is their security blanket. So we've set that $300,000 to the side in terms of discussing where, if they have enough to retire. So not only are we creating a little bit of a buffer there for them in terms of their assets, but it's maintaining the security that they like to have, even while they're working.
Well, also liquidity as well, because they could be in a situation where they may have some type of, we like to call them non-recurring capital expenditures. Maybe it's doing some home improvements. Possibly for some of our clients, it's a wedding. Others, it might be, having to replace that car, or wanting to replace it very close to retirement as their quote unquote last car, which we know really never is the case, but that's kind of cool. But having cash there that's already been after-tax assets really puts them in a position where, they can draw on these assets and not have to worry about income taxation, not only the effect of federal income taxes, but also possibly the effect on their Medicare Part B premiums in the future.
And Joe and Mary came to us with concerns that are very similar to everyone that comes to visit with us. They were concerned about their income once they retired. And what our goal with every initial coaching session is to determine if you can enjoy the same lifestyle in retirement as you did the day before you retired. So that's why our approach tends to look from how much are you spending every month? Like we talked about after Joe and Mary filled out that financial questionnaire, they kind of let us know not only were they not spending everything they were bringing home every month, they were able to put some of that money aside into that savings account we just talked about. So determining how much you're spending every month is really important, and that's where we start our planning from. Is what are your income goals? We like to match them to what you're spending every month.
Yeah, and again, if you can, we have a very large 6 by 8 foot whiteboard. And as I like to say, this is the time, once we've gathered the information, is we like to play This Is Your Life. So the way that we think about money and we imagine money is just, if you can, imagine a bucket, or in this case, multiple buckets, with faucets on the bottom of those buckets. And we're talking about is retirement assets, the pre-tax stuff, Roth IRA assets, the after-tax stuff. Also, in some cases, we have clients that have other non-retirement assets that are available to them. And then obviously they have some other pools. In this case, we know that Mary has a pension pool, and there's also their Social Security pools. So the art, as well as really the science, I guess you would say the science of this at this point, is how do we manage these faucets, turn them on and up and down, if you want, on and off, in the most tax efficient way so that these folks can meet their long-term objectives, at the same time just really feel comfortable that they're never going to run out of money. And in some cases, we find that folks really have more cash flow and or assets than they need to fund their retirement needs. And we call them rock stars. So let's just wait and see how Joe and Mary fit into the process, right, babe?
That's right. So like we talked about before taxes, I'm sorry, with taxes included, Joe and Mary need about $9,600 a month. Mary's pension's been frozen, so we know that as soon as she retires, she's going to elect that benefit. So if we take 9,600 and we subtract out that 1,200, we know that they'll need about $8,400 a month before they get to Social Security, because one of their goals was potentially to wait until normal retirement age to elect their Social Security benefit. So if they're going to retire at about 64 and their normal retirement age is 67, we have about a 3-year gap to fill that will not include their Social Security income. So that means that they're going to need about $100,000 for 3 years in order to maintain their lifestyle, not elect Social Security, but continue to live the way that they want to. So we needed to create that income stream that covered that Social Security amount for the first 3 years. That's that $300,000.
So, and let's just stop here for a moment as sort of a sidecar. If Joe and Mary both decided that they were no longer going to work, or even consider the possibility of going back to work, it is possible, after running the numbers for them, which we would do, saying, hey, let's start Social Security now versus waiting till 67, we wouldn't have to necessarily deal with this gap. At the same time, one may decide, hey, I do want to work, or I'm going to do part-time, or I'm going to do consulting, etc. And that would change the math. Everybody's math is a little bit different when it comes to Social Security planning. In this, again, with this scenario, we assume that they told us that they wanted to have the option that's there, but they truly wanted a way to put off benefits. And one reason that a couple might consider wanting to put off the higher earning or the higher Social Security earners benefits is so that that survivor benefit that would be available at that spouse's death would then be available to the surviving spouse, because we know that at the death of one spouse, the other spouse has a choice of either continuing their benefit or dropping their benefit and taking their spouses. So these are all considerations. And again, if you want to call them also other game plans that we're running at the same time as we're doing your retirement income game plan.
Right, so how do we fill that $100,000 deficit for the meantime? Like you said, Dad, there's always the opportunity to course correct, make the decision that, hey, we want to take one of these Social Security benefits, take them earlier, and we can continue to adjust the faucet, so to speak, based on income that's being brought in. But if we work from no Social Security benefits for 3 years, how do we generate that income? Well, we know that between Joe and Mary's pension, 401k and 403b through work, they have close to $2.7 million. If we are using a prudent rate of withdrawal, which we consider 4%, so that means we want them to be able to live off of the interest and the earnings of their capital and not eat away at the principal. We know that they can pull about $106,000 per year without, as my dad likes to say, tipping over the apple cart. So,
But they only needed 100.
which is great.
Whee!
That means that they already have more than enough cash flow available to them, even without their Social Security benefits, which is really cool because we know that, even without that additional income, they already have enough in assets to support their lifestyle. So when those Social Security faucets are turned on, all that we are doing is making the assets that they have more liquid because they won't be tied up in order to create that income for Joe and Mary every month. They'll be liquid and available to do other fun things with because Social Security is going to step in and cover $5,600 a month of that gap that they currently have, which sits at $8,400 a month without their Social Security benefits. So once Joe and Mary reach normal retirement age, we know that $5,600 is going to be coming in every month. That's $67,000 a year that we can cover over of that $100,000 that they were short. So that means their new deficit's only going to be about $33,000 a year.
Which obviously based upon having an asset base of 2.7 million of retirement assets, that's really about 1%. So that's a walk in the park because we're much lower, obviously have a smaller number than the prudent 4% rule.
And this is really what we refer to as managing faucets, because we know that as soon as even one of those Social Security benefits begins, we can start decreasing the amount of money that's being distributed from their retirement accounts because Social Security is going to step in and pick up that weight for them.
Yeah, again, I think again, two other things to mention here. We know that the taxation of Social Security benefits, it's ordinary income, but only up the maximum of 85% of it is includable as income. So you have 15% to tax-free. That's one incentive for many folks to consider. And in this particular case with Joe and Mary, if Mary is there's no way she's going back to work, it might be a reason for her to consider at this point maybe changing their minds and them taking her Social Security benefit early. The other thing that we didn't talk about, and you may be thinking at this moment, is when we went to fill this income gap for them, which was about 100,000 a year, we were doing it 100% from their retirement income assets. We weren't actually touching any of their Roth IRA assets or even that 300,000 of non-retirement assets. We know that for a married couple filing jointly, 90,000 is really the top end of what we call the 10% effective tax rate. So there is a possibility, again, based upon their liquidity desires, etc., that we might have even considered doing a little bit of moderation for those 3 years, which is sharing, maybe drawing either some from that Roth or some from those non-retirement assets to make up the difference in that income to keep them at that 10% effective tax, or I'm sorry, effective tax rate. And obviously when their Social Security benefits came in, we have a little bit more room and leeway so that we could, if we wanted to, not draw as much as we need to, but maybe even draw a little bit extra so that we could replenish those savings if we want. Again, it's a war game. I mean, frankly, it's pretty, and really, it's fun. And the best part is, as I've always said to other clients, this is all about greed for you. We're not really talking about where are we investing the money, how are we getting to where we want to do, because we're not allowed to. But over this type of a situation, but at the same time, it all comes down to the algebra. How much cash flow do you need? When do you need it? And then how do we tap those sources in the most effective way to get you to where you want to go?
I also think, Dad, you brought up a great point about moderating the tax brackets, or at least keeping them in mind when we are making decisions, because I'm sure many of you are thinking, okay, great, well, they have their income covered for their monthly expenses, but what happens when large non-reoccurring expenses come up? And this doesn't have to be negative things. A lot of times people think like, oh, the hot water heater breaks, or I have to replace the roof, things that you have to do for maintenance, but you don't necessarily want to do. What about the fun things like weddings, large family trips that grandma and grandpa or mom and dad want to foot the bill for the kids or the grandkids for? How do we plan for those things? Well, one, we have to plan for the income for them, but the second piece is, how do we plan for the taxes? Dad, like you just mentioned, only 85% of their Social Security benefits are going to be taxable, plus Mary's pension. So that gives them an automatic base of about $71,000 of taxable income. We know they need another 33,000 or so to make their monthly expenses work. So if we combine those two, they're sitting about 105,000, which does bump them from the effective rate of 10% closer to 12 or 15%, because they've really moved into the 24% marginal bracket. So that means from 89,000 to 105,000, they're paying 24% on just that piece of money, or just that piece of their income. Now the question becomes, let's put dates and amounts of money with these income needs. I want to take a family vacation that I think is going to cost us about $12,000, but I want to do it next year. Okay, let's make sure that we have a date and a dollar amount associated with it, because we know that Joe and Mary have another almost $80,000 within that 24% tax bracket, where they won't be bumping up into that final bracket. So does that mean that we want them to be taxed 24% on every additional dollar that they withdraw? Or are we going to try to moderate those taxes for them by either potentially pulling from their Roth account, having them foot some of the expense using their 300,000 of savings that's after tax, and then, like my dad said, backfilling that at a later date? Or are we literally going to plan to start sending them money? Maybe we do it over a 2-year period. The great thing is that a 2-year period for you can be the span of 3 days, but for the IRS, it means everything. December 31st and January 1st are 2 separate tax years. So we could essentially send Joe and Mary $6,000 December 31st and $6,000 January 1st, which would split that $12,000 bill in half in terms of taxation, but it really made no difference in terms of how quickly they were receiving the funds.
And this also goes to another issue that we discuss on the show often, and frankly, we do talk about with many folks in coaching sessions. Most of our clients do not have mortgages, home mortgages, when they come to us. They've paid these off, but there are many that have. And for those that do have mortgages, we know that there's an outgoing cash flow that's associated with those. And for many of them, they just feel like we're going to be a little bit more secure in our planning in the long haul if we have this home paid off. Well, let's use an example. Let's say that Joe and Mary had a remaining home mortgage of, let's say, $100,000 that was left in the remaining balance. they want to get rid of it right away. Well, based on their current income, which is really running around their desired need of around 96,000. If we were to add 100,000 right away to their income, two things that have to happen. Number one is that if we weren't touching their non-retirement assets and we had to go um, into their basically their new IRAs, we're looking at really having to 100 really is going to cost them 125,000 in terms of because of the taxes. At the same time, they're going to be going over, if we pulled that all at one time, they'd be going over the limit, which would increase their Medicare Part B premiums for 2 years.
And well, that's a really sneaky one because it doesn't hit for 2 years and then it lasts for an entire year. So if they pulled that money out this year, they wouldn't be looking at that the additional premium increase until 2025. So that's definitely an important one to keep in mind.
Yeah, so again, that would be another situation where we might say to them, okay, let's do this over 2 years, but maybe again, as Aaron was mentioning, maybe it's literally over 2 days, which is we make the first distribution by December 31 and we do the second distribution on January the 2nd or the 3rd, paying that mortgage off at that time so that we've split the taxation over 2 years, but then we've achieved that, the same objective more clearly. So I'm sure that you can imagine that there certainly are I mean, let's be honest, stuff happens. Good stuff happens, unexpected things happen, bad things happen. So having liquidity and really having a game plan that's not only as tax effective as it can be, but also monitoring that game plan and truthfully having a coach to do that for you, it just puts you in a position where I think you'll feel a little bit more comfortable. And we know that the folks that we deal with, they're pleased to get some confirmation for the thinking that they have. In a lot of cases, say, you know what aren't we thinking about? What are the things that we should consider that we don't know? Because as we know, it isn't what you know is what gets you in trouble in many cases. It's what you don't know. So having that coach on the payroll can sometimes be very effective for you.
Absolutely. And it's always nice to have an objective set of ears to bounce ideas off of, or like you just said, Dad, come up with some alternatives that maybe you hadn't thought of yet to get you to the same place. Because at the end of the day, like we started our conversation off with, this is all about you, which is tell us a little bit about yourself and how you hope we can help you. And that's really where the basis of our relationship with each of our current clients and the new relationship with each of our, potential or prospective clients starts, which is in what ways can we help you get to your goals? For most people, that's how do I get to retirement? But for other people, once they're retired, you have new goals and new objectives that maybe you hadn't even thought of because, you have to get to the first finish line, which is retiring, doing those rollovers, having your health insurance set up properly, feeling comfortable in really the next chapter of your life to say, well, now not only how do we want to spend our next chapter, a lot of times you've already thought that through really thoroughly, but how do we want to spend our money in the next chapter when we feel comfortable with our income, we feel comfortable with our health insurance, and maybe we've consolidated or liquidated some of these debts that we've had. So goals can change, and that's really why we're here to work with our clients on a regular basis, not only to make sure that the game plan that we set in place continues to adjust as their lifestyle adjusts, but that we can be there not only maybe to help set new goals, but help achieve goals that come up as time goes on, because we find that our clients' families are expanding, their goals are expanding and changing, and sometimes the things that they'd like to, the ways that they'd like to help their family are changing.
And I would just say that if you can imagine how powerful it is that we're able to actually do these scenarios as we discussed while they're sitting there.
Right.
And doing it on our electronic whiteboard, saving that information, printing it for them if they need to. But the game plan is really written for us to follow. Our clients, they do the important things, which is they bring the money to the table. That's really the fuel that the water that goes into these reservoirs that we could pump out later. But at the same time, They let us understand what their behaviors are. You know, what are their goals? How do they, and obviously we have a lot of conversations about children, grandchildren, their financial health. What goals do they have for them in the future? Are they assisting them in any way monetarily, or do they want to? And under what circumstances do they want to? But having that game plan and us being able to go back and basically pull out every meeting, reflect on it, make changes, update it, etc., puts us in a position, I think, to give you all good advice. At the same time, I think it gives them peace of mind of knowing that are we truly on track? Because at the end of the day, um, investing is how we get paid, but advice is truly what the clients get, and that's really what they want. So we obviously appreciate your time this morning. As you can tell with Joe and Mary, they were rock stars. Woo! We love that.
Right.
Yeah, we love rock stars, but rock stars come in all different shapes and different sizes. And so again, having the information available during the first meeting for us to review, having the time and sitting down, whether it's by Zoom or by telephone or by whatever, or etc., or in person, it's just fun. I mean, this is truly the fun part for us.
Yes, it is. And we truly appreciate the 35 minutes you spent with us this morning. We had a nice time with all of you. Hope that it was a meaningful time for you as well. Again, my email is aaron@jblfinancial.com. If you have any questions about the webinar, have any specific questions about yourself, we're happy to chat. Or you can always give our office a call, 314-863-0008. We're going to continue to offer these webinars once every quarter. So if you also potentially have any ideas for things you'd like to hear us talk about, we would love the feedback, because we would like to make these as valuable as possible for all of you. That's what we're here for. So thank you for your time this morning. If you're all in St. Louis, stay cool because it's a scorcher out there today.
And don't forget to tune into the show at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning on the Big 550 KTRS.
Have a great rest of your week, everyone.